good evening, everyone, and welcome to Meet Touchstone Essentials live product training edition. I'm here with Cindy Klement, and we're so excited to have you here with us, Cindy, as always. And we'd like to point out that Cindy has an incredible background. We're so pleased that Cindy can be with us a couple of times a month to teach us because we're learning from a true expert. Cindy, as you can see, is an acclaimed speaker, published author, nutritionist, herbalist, adjunct professor. She's written a book we want to make sure you all know about, Your Body's Environmental Chemical Burdens, and it has won a lot of awards. As I've mentioned many times, I was surprised to see all the different awards that it has won. So you've done some great things, Cindy, and we're excited to have you here.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you so much. It's always my pleasure to be here. It really is. I just love sharing and teaching and just getting people to understand why we need to take care of our bodies. So thanks for that introduction.
Absolutely. And tonight we're going to be talking about the respiratory system, right?
That's right.
And really not a better time to talk about that with COVID season. So respiratory health is a very important thing, and we've got some great products for that here at Touchstone.
Absolutely. And I mean, in the winter months, we deal with the flu and colds and respiratory infections and respiratory viruses. And so it's a good time of year to talk about that. So shall we begin? All right, let's do it.
Yes.
All right. So folks, good evening, by the way. Healthy lungs. We're going to talk about respiratory system. So healthy lungs constantly renew themselves when given the right nutrients and the right lifestyle factors. The lungs contain cells that renew at different rates. So we have these little cells that we'll talk about in a bit and give you an image of them. They're called alveoli cells, or they're little tiny air sacs. They're little one-celled things. And so they are needed for that exchange of oxygen and gases deep within the lungs. And well, these little air sacs have a steady progress of regeneration. It takes about a year for all of those cells to be replaced. But meanwhile, the cells on the surface of the lungs themselves renew every 2 to 3 weeks, because these are the lungs' first line of defense. So they have to be able to renew rather quickly. The respiratory system is a group of organs and tissues, of course, whose primary purpose is to supply our blood with oxygen and then to expel that carbon dioxide from all the cells in our body. We can live a few days without water, we can live a few weeks without food, but we really can't live more than a few minutes without air. So our respiratory system has to be optimally functioning for good health. And unfortunately, as with all of the other organs and body systems in our body, our lung function declines with age. In fact, a 30-year-old takes in twice the amount of oxygen compared to that of an 80-year-old. Our lungs contain about 1,500 miles of airways and more than 300 million of those alveoli sacs. So each day we take on average 2,000 breaths, breathing in 30 to 35 pounds of air. And over the course of a lifetime, if we are so blessed to live to be 80 years old, over that course of a lifetime, we may take as many as 700 million breaths. So unfortunately, the respiratory system is susceptible to a lot of debilitating diseases. We've got about 400,000 Americans that die of lung disease every year. And we've got 1 out of 4 Americans that have to deal with asthma. So what we're going to do is let's just reacquaint ourselves with the anatomy and physiology of the respiratory system. And then we'll talk about the things that we can do to really build it and keep it healthy. As we inhale the air is warmed by the blood-rich nasal cavity, which is also lined with mucous membranes that moisten the air and trap any type of incoming particle. Now, if there's an infection in our sinus or our nasal cavities, it can drain down our throat and can affect our lungs. Now, the pharynx, I think it's on there, the laryngopharynx. The pharynx is also known as the throat. And what that does is it connects the mouth and the nasal passages to something called the larynx. And the larynx is nothing more than this muscular passageway that's about 5 inches long through which both the food and air pass. It's located behind the throat. It's formed by 9 different cartilage, but it has an elastic flap on the top of this larynx. And what happens is it's called the epiglottis, or the guardian of the airway. And when we swallow food, it rises and it forms, the epiglottis forms a tight lid over the opening to route the food down the esophagus and into the digestive tract, rather than into the trachea. So as you know, sometimes that flap doesn't work just right, and you'll choke if you swallow something that doesn't belong in there, because only air is supposed to go down that way. So let's go here. So the trachea, or the windpipe, this is the pathway for the air to be transported to the lungs, and it keeps dividing. First, it divides into 2 branches called the bronchi. So think of bronchioles. So it divides to bronchi, but in the lungs, these bronchi continue to subdivide and subdivide into smaller and smaller branches, and they finally end up in the very smallest of passageways called the bronchioles. And the bronchioles themselves terminate or end at these alveoli air sacs, which resemble a cluster of grapes. And as we mentioned before, there are more than 300 million of these alveoli in the lungs. And again, they're the final line of defense for the respiratory system. Now, inside these alveoli, we have something called phagocytic cells, phagocytes, and phagocytes literally means to eat. So they're a type of white blood cell that wander in and out of that alveoli, and they pick up bacteria and debris. And they can surround and kill a microorganism. They ingest foreign materials, they remove dead cells, and they also boost our immune functioning. And also, it's here in this area that the oxygen passes into the capillary blood, and then the carbon dioxide leaving the blood enters those alveoli air, and then we expel it through the lungs. So this part of our lungs is extremely important, as all parts are, but especially these alveoli sacs, which are what collapse and don't work as well when we have emphysema or something like that. Now, the lungs, of course, they are just sacs of elastic tissue, and they act as the passageway, or they house the respiratory tree. And something that is not always considered when we talk about the respiratory system is the diaphragm. Now, the diaphragm itself is just a very large muscle. And what it does is it helps to pump the carbon dioxide out of the lungs and pull oxygen in. So as the diaphragm contracts, the breathing takes place and oxygen is pulled into the lungs. But when the diaphragm relaxes, the carbon dioxide is pumped out of the lungs. So let me go back and we'll talk about the pleura too. The pleura has 2 thin layers of tissue that line the inner surface of the walls of our chest behind our ribs. And these layers then slide over one another as the lungs expand and contract. There's a small amount of what we call pleural fluid that serves as a lubricant. And what it does is it reduces that friction as the tissues rub against one another. So you've probably heard of pleurisy. And what that is it's just an inflammation of that pleura area, and it causes severe, sharp chest pain that worsens as we breathe. So it's incredibly incredibly painful. So again, keeping our lungs healthy is essential to feeling our best, because we've got asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, so COPD. We've got pulmonary fibrosis and cancers, and these can all significantly affect our health, as can pneumonia and lower respiratory infections and viruses. And then, of course, there's exposure to contaminants like cigarette smoke and environmental toxicants, as well as if we are eating an inflammatory diet. This can all take a toll on our respiratory system. However, the research is showing that if we do lifestyle modifications, including eating a nutrient-rich diet and protecting our lungs, we can reduce the lung diseases and symptoms of disease. And what's more, which I think is really important, are we have specific nutrients that have been identified to be particularly useful to lung health. So we're going to take a look at them right now. Let's see. Research, we'll talk about all of these and where they're found in TE's products. Research has shown that by regularly consuming apples promotes lung functioning. Now, I thought this was interesting when I was looking at this, because I have a granddaughter who has a compromised respiratory system from childhood, actually from childbirth, and she eats apples all day long, every day. It's her favorite food. And I questioned, when I read about this promoting lung function, if that isn't her intuitive way of getting what she needs, because the examples, not that she's a smoker, but the studies show that apple intake is associated with a slower decline in lung functioning in ex-smokers, and that consuming apples is associated with a reduced risk of developing COPD, and it's also been linked to a lower risk of asthma and lung cancer. And they feel that it's due to the high concentrations of antioxidants in apples, which include flavonoids and vitamin C. Now, where do we get our apples? Super green juice. Barley grass is a whole grain, and it's very high in fiber. And what we know is that high fiber diets have been shown to have a protective effect on lung function, and can even reduce the risk of mortality from lung-related diseases. Now, the antioxidants found in barley grass promote lung health, and they protect against cellular damage. So if you missed our webinar on antioxidants, you might want to take a few minutes to catch up on what they are and how they function in the body if you're not familiar with them. Now, barley grass is found in both super green juice and in super greens plus D. Now, the roots and the greens of beets contain compounds that also optimize our lung functioning. They're rich in compounds that help to relax the blood vessels and reduce blood pressure and optimize our oxygen intake. Beets have also been shown to improve our physical performance and our lung functioning, especially in people with lung conditions, including something called pulmonary hypertension. Pulmonary just means related to lungs. So pulmonary hypertension is a disease that causes high blood pressure in the lungs, as interesting as that sounds. Now, additionally, beets are packed with magnesium, with potassium, with vitamin C, and carotenoid antioxidants, all of which are essential to our lung health. Now, beets are found in super green juice. Blueberries are loaded with nutrients. Their consumption, of course, has been associated with a number of health benefits, including protecting and preserving our lung health. Blueberries are a very rich source of something called anthocyanins, which are powerful pigments or plant colors that are shown to protect our lung tissue and from oxidative damage. They did a study with 839, odd number, but 839 veterans, and they found that blueberry intake was associated with the slowest rate of decline in the lungs as one ages. Now, blueberries are found in both super green juice and in essentials. Cabbage is a very rich source also of these anthocyanins, and they have been linked to a reduced decline in lung functioning. And what's more, cabbage is packed with fiber. And as mentioned, the studies show that people who consume more fiber have better lung function than those who consume low amounts of fiber. So we can find our cabbage in super green juice. Now, cocoa is high in flavonoid antioxidants, and I should say not they, but cocoa contains a compound called theobromine, which helps again to relax the airways in the lungs. And this is so important. As a child, I suffered for years and decades, I should say, with asthma. And when you have an asthmatic attack or asthma problems, there's a great deal of inflammation. And you know, when something's inflamed, it swells. And so what would happen is these bronchioles would swell and they would close. Well, if you have something like theobromine in cocoa that can help to relax those airways in the lungs, man, what a great thing. Cocoa intake has been associated to a lower risk of allergic respiratory symptoms and have been shown to help protect against lung cancer. Now, this is a big study. They had 55,000 people in this study, and they found that those with the higher flavonoid consumption from foods, including chocolate, had better lung function than people that had diets low in flavonoids. So where do we find our cocoa? In Boost Focus Fuel. Now, ginger has been used in Africa and in the Caribbean as a favorite to aid a healthy immune response as well as a healthy respiratory response. Ginger is found in wellspring. Now, green tea, this is a big one. It really has impressive effects on our health. Its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties have been shown to inhibit something called fibrosis, pulmonary fibrosis. So what fibrosis is it's a thickening and scarring of the lung tissue. So if we can inhibit that type of discomfort or disease, my goodness, with green tea extract, why not? Remember, pulmonary fibrosis is characterized by this progressive scarring of the tissue in the lungs, and research shows that the green tea may help treat this disease. They did a very small study in 2020 with people that had pulmonary fibrosis, and they found that a treatment with green tea extract for simply 2 weeks reduced the markers of fibrosis. Didn't, of course, heal it in 2 weeks, but it reduced those markers. Now, green tea is found in 4 of Touchstone Essentials products. It's in Super Green Juice, it's in Essentials, Boost Focus Fuel, as well as Green Energy. Now, pumpkin. Pumpkin contains also a variety of lung health promoting compounds. It's especially rich, again, in carotenoids. And think of carotenoids as like a carrot, right? The color of carrot. So there it is, the color of carrot, the color of pumpkin. Carotenoids include beta carotene, lutein, zeaxanthin, all of which have these powerful antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. And the evidence of research showed that smokers have 25% lower concentrations of carotenoid antioxidants than do non-smokers, which of course is harming our lung health. But luckily, the studies also show that having higher blood levels of carotenoids is associated with better lung functioning in both older and younger populations. So we find pumpkin in our super green juice. Now, tomatoes, they are among the richest dietary sources of something called lycopene, which is, again, a carotenoid antioxidant that's been associated with improved lung health. So consuming tomato products has been shown to reduce airway inflammation, again, kind of restricting when it's inflamed. So the tomato products are able to reduce that airway inflammation in people with asthma and improve lung functioning in people with COPD. They did a study in 2019 with 105 people that had asthma and demonstrated in this study that a diet rich in tomatoes was associated with a lower prevalence of poorly controlled asthma. Plus, tomato intake is also associated with a slower decline in lung functioning in ex-smokers. So tomato found in super green juice. Finally, turmeric is often used to promote overall health due to its potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. The main active component in turmeric is called curcumin, and that has been shown to be especially supportive to lung functioning. And this was a larger study. They had 2,500 people and they found that those who consumed curcumin showed that they had improved lung functioning, and that the lung functioning of smokers who had the highest levels of curcumin was significantly greater. Their lung functioning was significantly greater than those who had the lower curcumin intake. So turmeric is found in both super green juice and in wellspring. Now, in summary, here's where we find these nutrients that are so lung supportive. In our green energy, we've got green tea. In the super greens plus D, we've got the barley grass. In essentials, we've got blueberries and green tea. In the boost focused fuel, we've got our cocoa and green tea. In wellspring, we've got ginger and pumpkin and turmeric. And in the super green juice, of course, we've got it all. We've got apple and barley grass and beets and blueberries and cabbage and green tea and pumpkin and tomatoes and turmeric. So really beneficial products for supporting our lung health. Now, what else affects this lung functioning? And of course, the answer is going to be toxicants. Toxicants, of course, affect every system in our body. So really, it's no wonder that they affect the respiratory system as well. Now, VOCs are volatile organic compounds, and those are usually the things that you can smell, the adhesives, the paints, the gasoline, and those types of things. And yes, they cause irritation in the eyes, but they also cause irritation of the respiratory tract and can increase cancer of the lungs. Separate studies that involved farm workers in Iowa and Ohio reported that respiratory symptoms were significantly associated with pesticide use. And one particular group of pesticides called chlorinated pesticides, exposure to that was significantly associated with lower respiratory infections and asthma in young children. PCBs, what they are these really highly toxic industrial compounds, and they certainly pose serious health risks. They're used in the manufacture of plastics and lubricants and adhesives and protective coatings for wood and metal and concrete. But PCB exposure can increase the risk of lower respiratory infections as well. So toxins are all around us, and we do battle them every day. They are roughly, and the numbers vary, but there are roughly 80 to 100,000 chemicals in our environment, and they are certainly damaging our health. Now with zeolite, this is a natural mineral with a rare negative charge, and heavy metals and toxicants have a positive charge. So when the zeolite comes in close proximity, it will attract that toxin, bind it, and remove it from the body. So the question is are you protecting your respiratory system and other organs and body systems on a daily basis with detoxification? If not, you should be. So let's talk a little bit about the endocannabinoid system. We have CB1 receptors in our endocannabinoid system, and they're found in what we call the peripheral nervous system, which is found outside of the brain and spinal cord. But CB1 receptor sites are also found in the digestive tract and in the respiratory tract. CBD oil has been shown to exert a beneficial effect on the respiratory system. There's a peer-reviewed medical journal called immunopharmacology and immunotoxicology. And in this journal, they published, and I'll quote, "The present and previous data suggests that in the future, CBD might become a useful therapeutic tool for the attenuation, which is reduction, for the reduction and treatment of inflammatory lung disease." These are medical journals. The other one is Molecules, and this is a peer-reviewed journal of chemistry. And they published the following: "The ability of cannabinoids to induce bronchodilation," opening that up, "and modifying inflammation in the respiratory system indicates its importance for airway physiology and pathology." So, wow, CBD for everybody's system, and especially in today's topic for the respiratory system. So, when used on a daily basis, these CBD products can feed and support our endocannabinoid system to balance not only the respiratory system, but our entire body. They are organic. There have been no solvents used in their processing. There are no artificial ingredients. They're fast acting, they're highly absorbable, and they're non-genetically modified. So we've got the best of the best, haven't we? So what else can we do for this respiratory system besides our supplements? Drinking water. It is critically important for good respiratory health and immunity. Remember, these moist mucous membranes, and that's the key word, the moist mucous membranes, serve as a first line of defense by trapping organisms. In fact, the air that we breathe is 95% saturated with water by the time it reaches those small alveoli sacs. And more than 1 quart of water is lost daily through respiration, just through breathing. 1 quart of water. So in addition to drinking plenty of water, we want to try and keep our indoor air humidity between 30 and 50%, being careful not to get the indoor humidity so high that it encourages mold, but also not so dry that our mucous membranes don't have that moisture. And then finally, exercising those lungs, either by doing deep breathing exercises or cardiovascular exercise to increase that respiratory rate. So that concludes tonight's presentation. Thanks so much for joining us again tonight, folks, and please mark your calendars when we'll meet once again on February 10th, and we're going to take a look at the cardiovascular system and how to sustain energy and stamina throughout the day. Back to you, Craig.
Excellent. Thank you, Cindy. We sure appreciate you as always. That was excellent. I really learned a lot from that presentation, and learned a lot about our products. And who knew that we had respiratory products, right?
Exactly.
That's fantastic. Hey, we've got a new year. We're starting a new year, and you and I just talked about the next 6 months and topics. What are a couple of highlights of things that you're excited to share with them over the next few months?
Oh my goodness. I gave Craig a list of, I think, 12 or 14 different webinars ideas. I have to get continuing ed units to maintain my 2 licenses. And one of the courses that I selected was on CBD. I have so much more to share with you, not just about CBD, but about the other compounds in that product and the terpenes in that product and just how effective they are. I'm really excited to share that. But I also want to address that when people talk about, should I be taking a multivitamin or a multi-mineral supplement on a daily basis? One of the classes, or actually both classes in March, I'm going to cover that and show you where are we getting enough of these vitamins and minerals so that we don't have to worry about supplementing with a pill form. So I guess those would be a couple of the highlights.
Those are 2 great ones, and there's many more on there. I remember looking at them and thinking, wow, when does it ever stop? She's just got great topics nonstop, right? Every one of them looked like fantastic presentation. So I'm excited about the next 6 months and all the things we're going to learn from you. Thank you again, Cindy. We appreciate you. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here with us tonight. And we'll see you soon on the 10th, February 10th, for the next product training with Cindy.
See you
Take
then.
care, everybody. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Bye.